Hello, ladies and gentlemen of On the Line. Today we have a very exciting special guest. We have Justin Ling, an independent journalist who has been following both the Conservative and the Liberal campaign. Some of you may remember Justin Ling from our old Oppo days. Well, we are back together, disagreeing and bickering like crazy on politics. You'll love it. So follow us after the break and listen to On the Line with Justin Ling.
This message is brought to you by Westinghouse. Canada's energy future is being shaped by the choices we make today. As demand for reliable, clean power grows, the need for proven solutions has never been more urgent. Nuclear energy is an essential part of the solution. Westinghouse's AP1000 reactor is the world's most advanced operational Generation 3+ reactor. Proven, safe, efficient, and ready now. It can be brought online within a decade, delivering clean, reliable power when we need it most. Building AP1000 plants can strengthen our electricity export capabilities and provide Canada's nuclear supply chain with access to 100% of the global market, all while minimizing the risks of building domestic nuclear energy generation on a single technology. Westinghouse is 100% Canadian owned and buys where it builds, working with over 450 Canadian suppliers to strengthen the domestic supply chain and bring benefits home to our nation. Canada needs energy. Westinghouse is ready. Learn more at westinghousenuclear.com/Canada.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen of the line. We have a very special guest with us here today. With us today is Justin Ling. Justin, for those people who may not be familiar with our Oppo days, I'm going to explain that we have got the band back together, at least for this episode.
Reunion.
It's a reunion tour. Justin, you and I have a history. You want to go explain our history?
Way back. We go way back. I mean, Jen, you and I used to host the wonderfully fabulous Oppo podcast together on the Canada Land Network, which everyone either loved, hated, or didn't listen to. And it's been years, but now we're back. We're doing it again.
We're doing it again. We're bringing the old gang back. I will say I mentioned this in our weekly podcast with Matt Gurney, but I always found it very funny when you or I would get approached by somebody with like an actual real job who said, "Oh, I used to listen to Oppo back when I was in college," and then I think you and I both died inside because we were like, "Oh my God, we're old now."
Yeah, we're aging. Yeah, the number of people who, I started listening to Oppo when I was in high school. No, you didn't. Get out of my face.
You didn't.
Get lost.
I was only in high school 5 seconds ago, so that's not possible. Okay, so we're not going to spend too much time reminiscing on old times because you were actually on the campaign trail, and I'm a bit jealous of you because thanks to this whole breeding thing I've done, it's been really difficult to get away and even attend rallies, much less actually attend the campaign trail. So what has your experience been so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's been exhausting. It's been really weird, to be honest. I mean, like, this is a really atypical campaign in a bunch of ways. So this is really the first campaign where I've been fully free to join one of the buses/planes. My normal kind of campaign routine over the last couple of campaigns is sort of drive around, go on my own schedule, and join the campaigns where I can, which I've been doing some of that this time. So I was shadowing Pierre Poilievre mostly through Quebec and Ontario. But then thanks to a wonderful grant from the Missioner Foundation, I've had the money to join the Liberal bus for most of the last week of the campaign. So I'm coming to you now from Niagara Falls. You can't see it because I'm in a drab conference room, but like the Niagara Falls are like just over there, where Mark Carney was.
You couldn't give us a better backdrop, eh?
I really couldn't. It's also really windy outside. Like I genuinely thought the Liberal leader was going to get blown into the water this afternoon. So I decided this is probably the safer place to record audio.
Okay, so firstly, is this your first time actually joining a campaign bus?
Yeah, it is. It's my first time on the actual real deal campaign bus / plane.
So
I've done both today already. Yeah.
I know we want to talk about the debates because we're recording this on Friday, which is like right after the English language debates happened. But first, I just want to try. Can we explain to the audience a little bit about what the deal is with joining the campaign bus, because there was some controversy at the beginning of the campaign, because we know that the Conservatives basically said no journalists on the bus. We're not taking any people on board. The Liberals still have a campaign bus that journalists can join. What is the situation there? Like, you as a journalist have to pay to be on that bus,
yes.
right? Like, you've
and
got to pay
really
your own
expensive.
freight.
Yeah.
So how much is it?
Yeah, so it's off the top of my head, $6,500 for a week.
Wow.
30
okay.
to 40 for the whole course of the campaign, about 1,500 a day. I think my numbers are a little off there. But that's basically, it's not cheap, right? Like you're
Right.
literally paying for your share of the cost of the bus rental and the plane rental. And on top of that, you have to pay for hotels. You get food covered, but like it's not cheap. And this is not taxpayer subsidized, right? Like,
Right.
I luckily have this grant, but otherwise I was going to pay out of pocket. And it's really, it is weird. I said earlier, this is a weird campaign. It is. It's a slower campaign. It's a lighter campaign than we're used to. Like, Justin Trudeau is kind of exceptional, but I know what his schedules look like on the normal campaign in 2019, for example, pre-pandemic. And he would do like 4 or 5 events a day. There'd be a town hall, a press conference, a rally, a meet and greet. Towards the end of the campaign, he would do like 3 or 4 provinces a day, right? Like he would go like PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, fly over to Ontario. Like, and to this campaign, like it's normally like the leaders wake up, do a press conference, maybe do a couple little meet and greets. Sometimes they do a rally, and that's kind of it. And this is true for both Kearney and Poilievre. Jagmeet Singh's campaign starts at 9 a.m. and is over by 5. Like this is a strangely light
So
campaign.
the pace of the
I'm not really
campaign's
sure why.
definitely downshifted on this one.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Like we've been like, so Mark Kearney is right now out doing a little bit of glad handing around Southern Ontario, but there's not a lot of us for us to do this afternoon. Like he did a press conference this morning. He'll do a little meet and greet this evening, and that's kind of it for the day. And Poilievre is even worse. Like Poilievre is really doing usually a press conference, a rally. Maybe there's a little thing, but he doesn't have journalists along. So a lot of the time the country isn't even seeing the stuff he's doing because he has banished film crews and radio reporters and everybody else from coming along with him.
Well, they hasn't banished them. He's just not facilitating the logistics like a campaign would normally do.
Well, no. But I mean, he in many cases he is literally. I'm not being hyperbolic here, because like his campaign has been emphatic that they do not want to get filmed in a bunch of situations, right? So like they'll send out their itinerary for the day, and like I said, it's usually 1 or 2 things in the schedule. Mm-hmm. If he goes off to meet steelworkers or he goes to to walk around at Tim Hortons, he doesn't tell us, so we can't go. Right. And usually when we do try and film those things, like I was just talking to some of my colleagues and I've seen it in action. Some of my colleagues have tried to film him like meeting and greeting supporters, or they've tried to film his bus coming into a venue.
Which is, by the way, just generic. That's generic B-roll. So B-roll, this would be the type of completely benign background shot that would then get clipped together over a bunch of this is absolutely industry standard, not gotcha stuff. This is just like, we need some images to go with the campaign story today.
Yeah, and his staff are jumping in and stopping it. Like literally in some cases elbowing reporters out of the way, pushing them around, saying you are forbidden from filming the bus.
B-roll?
You are not allowed to film that B-roll. You're not allowed to speak to his supporters. Like it's
Why?
Crazy. Exactly.
Why?
Like it's
B-roll
routine. Exactly.
Okay, so are the staff like new? Do they not understand what they're doing? What they do not understand what the media is doing in that respect?
They are new. As best I can, there's one conservative staffer who is a veteran of a couple campaigns. He's been around the block a few times, I think, anyway. And then there's a number. This is their first ever campaign. But these are marching orders, right? Like,
okay, so there's 2 things that really bother me about this. One is that by law, if you are in a public place, anyone can film you. This is you don't have the right to demand that someone not film you if you're in a public place. So
exactly.
They don't have the legal right to demand that media not film the bus rolling out. Like that is not actually, they have no legal grounds to be making that request.
And I'll tell you what, there's one instance where the Poilievre team was at a factory somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And they roll in and they kind of push the reporters around. Here's where you can film. Here's where you can't. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can't. At one point, some of the reporters try and start getting some B-roll of the factory, and Poilievre staff, and Poilievre touring the factory and meeting some people, Polyev staff come in and get in their face, say you have to leave, you have to get out of here. It's not us, it's the owners of the factory want you gone. They need to get their factory back. So the reporters go over and talk to the woman who manages the factory and says, is that true? And the woman goes, oh, no, we love that you're here. Do you want a tour? Like, they're just lying to
Weird.
it. Like, it's just this tin pot dictator routine. These little Napoleons want to boss us around and show us they're the boss, which
They're the
whatever, I
boss.
guess if you want to, but it's
Maybe
all self-defeating. It means that Canadians just see and hear less of Pierre Polyev, and that's not our fault. That's theirs.
Well, that's
We're
an interesting
trying.
that's an interesting psychological tactic. The other thing that I just want to explain again to our audience what B-roll means. So again, B-roll is not gotcha. Like, it's not like they're trying to catch anyone doing anything wrong. It's just you need, whenever you're doing a television or a show, it's like, this is what happened on the campaign today. You need to actually get a whole bunch of just material of generic images. So a bus rolls out of the station. You know, the leader does the tour of the factory. It's just, there's no ill intention here. It literally is just the generic everyday, this is the images of the campaign that happened today. And you need those kinds of generic images to build a package. It's just part of the technical requirements of doing the job. So, like, I mean, so the conservative side is fascinating that they're behaving in that way. This is obviously it's a strategic choice by the conservatives to behave that way. This is something that I think that we'll talk a little bit more about later, probably in the coming weeks, as the campaign draws to a close, and whether or not this strategic choice that the Conservatives have made has been self-defeating, I think is an interesting one. But can you talk to us about the contrast about what it's like to be on the Liberal side? The Liberals have kept the buses open. They have kept the planes open. It costs you money to attend this. Firstly, why would a journalist choose to be on the campaign bus? What are you getting out of it?
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot more access. Okay, so first off, logistically, following a leader around without traveling with them is really tough, right? So, like Pierre Polyev, for example, in the first couple of weeks of the campaign, would hop over to PEI and then Halifax and then Newfoundland and Labrador, and they would go to Toronto, right? Just getting commercial flights to follow that path is impossible. It means, just by definition, you have to skip some of the events. So you have reporters who are flying around on company dime, who are the reporter assigned to Pierre Polyev, who can't go to all of his rallies or his press conferences. So just on that front, it means Global or CTV or whoever just go to fewer events. That's bad, right? Whereas with Mark Carney, because you're on the bus, you come to everything. And on top of that, they can't hide events from you, right? And like the same way that Pierre Polyev is going off and doing meetings or doing one-on-ones or whatever, and there's no reporters there, or at least very, very, very few. That doesn't happen with the Liberal bus because we're along with him, right? In some cases, it's only the pool reporters who go, but generally speaking, like all the reporters here are going to all of the stuff and they get to see all of the stuff. And that means our viewers and our readers and our listeners get to see and listen to and read about all of the stuff. And you know, because we're on the, and like I said, it is a lighter campaign than normal, but because we're here and we get a full day's worth of stuff, that's enough to fill a package on the evening news, right? Like that's enough to do. You get all the B-roll you need. You know, some of the camera guys were here out, shooting Viz of the Falls. You get to get some local color, you speak to people, you talk to the local candidates, whatever. Whereas those in the Polyev campaign, you're showing up to the event, you're shooting the event, and then you're going to hustle out to catch your flight to wherever, or you're just hanging around, with nothing to do. And it's just like, I don't know, listen, I don't watch the evening news. I don't know who does anymore, but if you're watching like CTV National every night, I think you're probably seeing a significant difference in the quality. Maybe it's not enough for the normal person to actually pick up on, but the Liberal events are going to sound more fleshed out, more full. They're going to have more visuals. They're going to be more kind of detailed. Whereas the Polyev events, I think, are going to look lighter, and that's by design. They want to have just Polyev on the screen.
And that's not a conspiracy of the media trying to make Carney look better. That is a direct consequence of the decisions that the Conservatives have made in terms of how they do their media management.
And it also means, just really briefly, it also means there's just fewer surrogates, right? Like in a normal campaign, your leader should have the majority of time on screen, but you want local candidates and local endorsers, and we're just not getting that, right? Like Laura Stone from the Globe and Mail tried to get Stephen Harper to comment the day he endorsed Polyev, right, the other week at this rally. And, that would be great for the Polyev team. Having a clip of Stephen Harper speaking one-on-one to a journalist saying, Love this guy. But his team jumped in and blocked Laura Stone, who was just a great reporter, blocked Laura Stone from getting that conversation with Stephen Harper. It's like, what are you doing? Why would you not want Stephen Harper to comment to the Globe and Mail?
We know Stephen Harper has always had a hatred of the media going back to his days as Prime Minister. So maybe Harper himself didn't want to do that for whatever reason. But you know,
I can tell
like I said,
it was the campaign.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because it's the culmination of the way that the Conservative Party has managed media going back now 20 years. Like this is
so much worse.
This is interesting work. Okay, interesting. Okay, well look, interesting to note. I think that's totally interesting to break that down. How are you feeling? Are you exhausted on this campaign, or are you generally okay? And also just be careful because you're popping your peas a little bit into the mic.
Oh, good to know.
Yep.
I'm having a good time. I'm currently absolutely exhausted because to get through the debates yesterday, I chugged like 5 cups of coffee and then subsequently got 0 sleep and had to get on a flight this morning to Hamilton and then on a bus to Niagara Falls. So I'm exhausted. But I mean, like the campaign, it's an interesting campaign. I mean, like you know what's great about it, and this is a weird thing to say, it's great, but what's great about this campaign is that it feels like the first time in a long time the whole country has actually turned their attention to the election and said, we care again, right? Like we've gone now through subsequent campaigns where the country seemed either kind of indifferent or listless or bored or frustrated or angry at the fact that we had politicians. And I understand why. This time around, we are facing literally an existential threat, right? Like I think that is objectively true. And also we are facing a cost of living crisis. And I think it has made everybody stand up and go, okay, I really give a shit this time. I really genuinely care. And it's too bad that all of our leaders are sort of so callous that they decided to field this entire campaign without giving us costed platforms. But nevertheless, I mean, like it feels like everybody is sort of turning their attention to this. They're getting serious. We have some weird neo-nationalism happening in this country that we've not seen in a long time. And it's kind of fun and exciting that like politics feels responsive again.
Very interesting. Okay, so can I ask, I'm going to get into the debates a little bit, but can I ask about what your impressions of, I mean, just getting away from the media management side, what are your impressions in terms of tone, audience response, and messaging and policy coming from the Liberal and the Conservatives campaigns respectively?
Yeah, listen, you know, there's this old idiom about Canadian politics that basically goes that, you know, whatever job you're running for, that's the job you're going to get. And let's be real. Pierre Poilievre is running to be opposition leader and Mark Carney is running to be prime minister. And at least if you believe the polls, that's where we're heading right now, right? Like Pierre Poilievre spends all of his days, here's the perfect example. Today, Friday, Pierre Poilievre does an event saying he's going to bring back plastic straws, right? Like, finally, our long paper straw national nightmare is over. Pierre Poilievre's going to bring back home.
The paper straws do suck.
We all agree that paper straws suck. But you know what Mark Carney's event was? It was looking over to the U.S. border and saying, you know, we will not become the 51st state. And by the way, I'm the only guy to deal with a rising China. And by the way, you know, By the way, Trump, whatever. I'm not sure I'm trying to come up with a third example. Trump is the first and third example of the kind of the ethos of Mark Carney's campaign. And just the visual dichotomy of those two things, I think is fascinating. Now, Poilievre... No,
Justin, just to be fair here, you are a communist who's wrong about everything.
That's so true. I couldn't agree more.
It's a thing.
I couldn't agree more.
But the thing I think you are making a fair point in is that Pierre has sort of hyper-fixated on either incremental policy or small ball domestic issues. And you have Mark Carney who's focusing on big picture, global, those kinds 100%. Of issues.
And it goes all the way down the line. Like Pierre Poilievre's housing strategy, I don't think is bad, but it's wildly incomplete. It repeats a lot of the same mistakes that Justin Trudeau's policies do in terms of putting more cash into the demand side of things. You know, his policy on helping workers out amidst the trade war is anemic to say the best. It's like it's a loan program for small businesses. That's nothing, right? Like it feels like Pierre Poilievre has decided the slogans are good enough, and therefore he doesn't need to have actual policy to win people over. And I think that's very condescending to people's intelligence, especially in an election where they are very much tuned in. Whereas Mark Carney, I mean, I think there's a lot of room to offer better alternatives and to criticize what he's putting forward, but no one is. I mean, he has an incredibly robust housing policy. He's putting real things on the table in terms of making our ports more competitive, in terms of finding new trading partners. I mean, he has a defense procurement strategy, which is so wonky, but I think it's actually quite smart. Again, I think there's so much room to compete with him there, but no one's trying. And I think it's easy to say that Trump won Carney this election, but Carney also seized the initiative and came forward and connected with people by putting forward serious things that made them sit up and go, okay, I like that. Let's do this. Whereas Poilievre seems to be castigating them and just whining all the time.
I mean, I don't know. I kind of disagree with you there. I do think that I don't see more substantive policy coming from the Liberals than I'm seeing coming from the Conservatives. But what I am seeing coming from the Conservatives is more incremental policy.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of.
Jen, tell me one bit of two bits of conservative policy that stick out to you as interesting, innovative, new or
sure. I would say probably one of the ones that did stick out to me was, for example, there was a capital gains tax, reducing, you can defer your capital gains tax stuff if you invest in Canada, for example. TFSA top-up stuff. I mean, a lot of that kind of policy, like I said, it's not huge. And also I think of some of the housing ideas that Poilievre's come up with, I know are good because the Liberals took it and implemented it.
And expanded on it.
Took it and expanded on it. So, like, I think that there's policy there, but most of the policy that I'm seeing coming out of the Conservatives would be absolutely at home under a Harper government. Yeah. Right? It's the second version of boutique tax credits, right? Like
couldn't agree more. Yeah.
That is basically it. So I'm not seeing stuff that,
and that does not feel like enough.
Well, but the problem is that a lot of the stuff that Carney's proposing, I think, is largely a continuation of a lot of the Trudeau era stuff. Like I said, like the housing stuff. I don't think that Carney's housing policy is particularly well fleshed out. I think that the idea that you're going to throw, what is it, $160,000 per home, and that's going to somehow double housing starts. That's insane-oville. I'd see no evidence that that's actually going to pan out. So, like I said, I'm not sure that either of these men have a strong or impressive plan. And I think that whatever policies the Conservatives come out with that's good, the Liberals will just steal, which leads us right back down to a race or a contest of personality and competence.
Well, but listen, it wouldn't be an Oppa reunion if we didn't bicker about something quite marginal.
That's what we're here for. I'm your politics wife, and it's what I exist to do.
But listen, I agree with you on the capital gains tax credit. I have a column that will come out eventually in the Star, basically saying that this is one of the best policies of the campaign. I wish there was any other part of the Conservative campaign that was this interesting and exciting. It sounds wonky. It sounds like a tax break for the rich, but what it actually is a big Kickstarter for Canadian innovation and productivity. It's such a good idea. I wish the Conservative campaign felt it was built around that instead of feeling like this policy was bolted onto the side of what is otherwise a boutique tax credit campaign. When it comes to the Liberals, I mean, I've covered a lot of housing policy over the last decade. I've been writing for a decade that it's time for our leaders to get serious about this housing crisis, and I felt like I was screaming into a void, and I feel unfortunately very vindicated. I loved the Conservative housing policy last election. I like a lot of stuff about Pierre Poilievre's, but looking at Mark Carney's platform, I mean, covering the development charges up to 50% is a good way of finally forcing Toronto to reduce housing costs. The Build Canada initiative, I actually do think the federal government has a role to play in building homes. But also, the housing accelerator that Trudeau started is working. It's not good enough. The things that Mark Carney is putting on the table on how to supercharge it and lose some of the stuff that's not really working, I think it's really good. I actually think that this is the housing policy we should have had 10 years ago. It's too late, but hey, I'm glad it's finally arrived. I think this could be the thing that finally gets us there.
Yeah, my concern is that this is going to amount to prefabricated housing on cheap land far away from where people actually need the homes. But, and we're going to start replicating some of the mistakes that we made with previous sort of low-cost housing where they just wind up becoming, social mobility traps. So that's kind of my fear about some of the stuff that's being proposed under the Liberal side. But look, nobody's gonna stick with us if we continue to like nitpick respective housing policy platform. No one is sticking with us for that. Okay, so I do want to move to the debates because you were actually at the debates. I have a feeling that you and I came away with very different impressions. My impression of the debate was Carney didn't fail. He met the bar that he needed to meet. But at the same time, on points and rhetoric, I felt like Pierre won. Not that actually matters for anything, but whatever. That was just kind of my takeaway.
So I disagree, but I think I agree and disagree at the same time. So listen, the French debate was a wash. Carney was terrible. He faded into the wallpaper. He didn't say or do anything like wildly offensive or stupid. Like I guess he survived. And Polyev was kind of doing his soft focus sort of please like me Quebecers thing. It's not working. I've seen him do the same shtick on Radio Canada and then on Tout le monde en parle and now on the French debate. I don't think it's moving the needle. I think Quebec's baked in. I think the Liberals take it by a margin. I think the question now is how badly the Bloc does, right? Like I think Quebec is settled. The English debates, and I wrote this and I listened, and I should preface this very explicitly by saying it's not us who decides who wins the debates, it's people who are watching. So if you don't agree with me, that's fine, maybe I'm wrong. I think Carney won it by a country mile. And I don't even think it's necessarily things that he did or said. It's the fact that he stood there while getting, yammered at by Singh and Polyev. Singh, who would kind of oscillate between hitting Polyev and hitting Carney. And I think he stood there and he kind of rose above it. He put his hands up and said, boys, stop bickering. And he got to look very prime ministerial and adult. And again, when I say Canadians elect the people who are running for the right job, he was standing there looking prime ministerial, and Polyev just didn't. Polyev's problem, and this is the strategy. This is their tactic. Polyev's strategy is to look disruptive and to look different and to look kind of mean, because the logic is Canadians are so frustrated and broke that they want a real bastard to get in there and screw things up, because the way things are working right now, it's not good. I get that tactic entirely, but I think it's totally mismatched for our current moment. It's a great strategy against Justin Trudeau. It's a terrible strategy against Mark Carney. And I think anyone watching Pierre Poilievre last night thought he's ideological, he's rigid, he's kind of smarmy, and maybe I wanted that before Donald Trump threatened to take over our country, but I think that's a risk right now. And I think that you turn and look at Mark Carney, a guy who's rattling off numbers, rattling off plans, rattling off all the foreign leaders he's met with over the last few weeks, and you're thinking, yeah, you know what, good enough. Somewhere between good enough and, yes, finally, something I can be confident in. But to put it another way, if Trudeau had been on that stage, I think Polyev would have taken it by 3 country miles.
Yeah, I totally disagree. I think that you don't win a debate by simply tolerating being yammered at. I think there were a couple of hits that actually really hit Carney pretty hard. One is he, throughout the debate, really failed to make the connection between Trump and Polyev and didn't even seem to use that line of attack. Sure, So that was, I think, a failure on his part. One, I think Blanchette actually got him on his sort of double talk on pipelines. Look, and I mean, I made this point earlier this week, but like you can't talk about building pipelines in every which direction if you're going to give Quebec a veto. You got it. Like, there's no way to circle the square on that one, and Blanchette was right to call him out for it. And secondly, there was, I think, for me, the peak moment of the exchange was during the part of the debate where the leaders were given the opportunity to ask questions. Pierre asked Carney a particular question. I think Carney got flustered, and I think that he defaulted to the trying to peg Pierre with the national security clearance question. Pierre handled it extremely well, knocked it out of the park as far as I could tell, and actually turned the attack back on Carney.
I agree with that.
So that's kind of how I read that. So, I think that in the sense that Carney didn't fail, he definitely did manage to go up there and look credible as a prime minister. But, did anybody secure a knockout blow against him? No. But if we're going to debate on who won on points and who won on rhetorical points, I think Pierre won in rhetorical points. I don't think it's going to matter. I don't necessarily think that that's necessarily, it depends on what people are looking for in a leader. To be honest with you, like, are you looking for someone who can go point for point at the debate club? Well, if the answer to that question is yes, we actually need that in this environment, then you're going to go with Pierre. If you're looking for someone who like gives you prime ministerial vibes, yeah, you might opt for Mark Carney. I'm not sure that Pierre didn't give my prime ministerial vibes, though, to be honest with you. In fact, this was probably the best version of Pierre that I've seen to date in the campaign.
Oh, well, I disagree with that.
Yeah?
And listen,
Okay.
like, you know, I'm not even like there are many aspects of Pierre Poilievre as a politician that I really like. Like, you know, I'm saying all these things that kind of sound like negatives, but they're not necessarily, right? Like, having a disruptive figure in Canadian politics right now is not the worst thing, putting Trump aside, right? Like, having somebody who's willing to come in and say, I'm going to review every one of these massive spending programs and figure out if they're working or not, and if they're not, I'm going to cut them. Like, good. Like, that's what we need. Part of the idea of the investment tax credit is that it will do away with things like the superclusters and the strategic innovation fund, things that, while they may have produced a couple of good things, have not been worth the money we put into them, right? So there are good things about Pierre Poilievre. And I think the great kind of tragedy of this campaign is that they decided to double down on the bad Poilievre and not focus on the good one. And that is, I think, a strategic decision that was made by Jenny Byrne. And I think we're going to look back on it and decide that was a real mistake. Or maybe he'll win and I'm totally having egg in my face. That's totally possible.
Look,
But listen, I think there was also
if
a
the
couple
Conservatives are about to like take the country in a last minute polling sweep, I mean, we can blame it on you.
Yeah, 100%. I will take that blame. I will eat that crow.
You making a prediction is kind of like someone changing their winter tires in March. Okay, I'm just saying.
If any consolation, I made the prediction that it would be a liberal minority like 2 years ago. So there's still lots, and I've stuck with it. So there's lots of room for me to be wrong anyway.
I respect the commitment.
Yeah, you're welcome. I stuck with it even as Poilievre was like up 30 points, just because whatever I make a prediction, I stick to it. But listen, I think there was a couple points where, because my guess going into last night was that Poilievre wouldn't hurt himself, but he wouldn't help himself either. I actually think he hurt himself. Like, you know, crime should be a good issue for him. People are freaked out about crime. Violent crime is going up a bunch. Mark Carney has no crime position whatsoever. But to watch Poilievre make this tortured argument that the only rights we should care about are the rights of hypothetical crime victims, and don't worry, we won't need new prisons. We'll just lock up all the really bad people and it'll all be a fix. I know there's a simple logic to that. I know it's not entirely wrong. Our bail system is fucked. I will acknowledge that. But I think there was I think the one thing you don't want to be called in this election is American style, and he leaned into it so hard that I think it hurt him.
Well, the three strikes law is clearly taken from American politics.
And it's we've studied it. We've studied it for decades. The three strike law does not work. There's not.
To be fair, I think that the three strike law that Pierre is proposing is very different from the California three strike law. This
really,
isn't
though.
Well, he's talking about if you can still be let out of prison if you prove X, Y, and Z here. So
true.
That's not the American style three style law. That's not the California version of the three style law. But I hear your point. I mean, but I think that the argument that the criminal justice system has put way too much emphasis on the rights of criminals and way too little emphasis on the rights and protections of victims, both hypothetical and real, is a very compelling argument. And I mean, there are stories that I could tell you that I covered from back in the day of putting so much focus on the poor beleaguered backstory of the person who raped the woman who was trying to get to her work that day, and giving absolutely no credibility and no attention and no compassion for the person who was the victim of that crime. Something is very out of balance in our criminal justice system that can't balance the rights of both victim and aggressor.
I don't disagree, but I think I think slogans are a really useful thing. I think Pierre Poilievre and Jenny Byrne have recognized the utility of slogans, but slogans have to be an entry point into
something serious,
right?
Yeah, okay.
They can't be the end point themselves, and it feels like Pierre Poilievre cannot get past his own slogans. And at a certain point, listen, if the only entry point into the election was the debate, I think you're probably right that they watched Pierre Poilievre and went, okay, yeah, honestly, he's saying some smart stuff. If you've watched a significant quantity of stuff for this election, as people actually have, we've seen viewership for traditional TV on newspaper websites, whatnot, skyrocket. Like, people are tuned back in a way they haven't been in a long time. if you've engaged with content about this election before, chances are you've seen Pierre Poilievre give the same lines and the same slogans and the same catchy alliterative sentences again and again and again. And you have to start wondering, like, where's the beef, right? Like, where is the beef to this guy? Which is anyway. And if that's where you're at, like, I don't think the debates were good for Poilievre. And Francophones, I can tell you for a fact, have seen Pierre Poilievre give that exact same performance 3 times in a row on national TV, each one probably watched by about 1 million Quebecers. And I think they probably by the 3rd time went, there's nothing else here. Like, this is it. All he has are catchy slogans.
He's too scripted. To some
like
extent,
Donald
his talent for politics is actually hurting him because he's too locked in, whereas
I think that's
Carney, even though he's making quite a few flubs and errors, that adds to his humanity and authenticity in a sort of paradoxical way, is kind of your argument here. Okay, so that's interesting. Do we want to sit and trash the debate commission? Because
Yes.
I think that there's an opportunity for us to be really harsh on the debate commission here. Matt in last week's Well, Matt in this week's The Line podcast talked a little bit about why he felt that the format wasn't serving anybody, but just the practical logistics of holding and covering this debate. I mean, I've already popped off. I don't think Blanchet should have been on that stage in the English language debate. I also don't think the debate should be held this late in the game. I think that debate should have been held 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
All right. Well, okay. Well, it's good to see we found consensus on a couple of points.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, listen. So just listening to a clip of Scott Reed talking about the debates commission on Hurley Burley's podcast. I don't know if I'm allowed to shout out Hurley Burley, but
by all means,
he used some of the most colorful language imaginable, and I have to see if I can kind of out rhetoric him, out hyperbole him on this. I've hated the debate commission since its very beginning. The debate commission was created
you hated the debates commission before it was cool, you hipster.
I'm a debate-hating hipster, yeah. Debate commission-hating hipster. Listen, Justin Trudeau created the debates commission to kill off independent private broadcaster debates. Like, this is not controversial. He was explicit about it at the time. He did not want so many debates, and he did not want private broadcasters having the ability, or Maclean's Magazine or whoever, having
Another
the ability
beautiful
to hold...
legacy from Justin Trudeau. Thank you very much, sir.
And he created the debate commission in order to strangle those other competitive debates out of existence. And in so doing, he created both a debate bureaucracy, and also he regulated and formalized the debate commission in a way...
bureaucracy, so we know how well that's working out.
Exactly. And he made it reviewable by the courts, right? Like, if City TV, as they did in 2015, has a debate and says to some right-wing conspiratorial outlets, hey, you're not invited, you're not allowed in. If you try to break in, security will escort you off the premises. You know, Ezra Levant can go to the federal court and ask for a review and an injunction, and the federal court will say, no, what? How? That's not our jurisdiction.
Organization.
Because the debates commission manages this, they're reviewable. And what jobs did the debate commission have? Their job is to pick the days the debates happen. Their job is to pick which leaders qualify to be on stage. And their job is to accredit media to show up. Everything else is still decided by a broadcast consortium that really has nothing to do with the debate commission. They do a little traffic control and management, but like, they really don't actually manage the debates themselves. So on those 3 things, they fucked up every single one in catastrophic fashion. They decided to change the time of the debate the day before based on a Habs game that was in the schedule for 3 months. Right?
Well done.
My God. Then they decided to kick out Green Party co-leader Jonathan Pedneau, who I have a real soft spot for. We don't even need to get into it.
It was good. It was very good that the Green Party wasn't there, and the debate was well served for the Green Party not being there anymore.
I disagree, but also
you're wrong. You're wrong on that.
But hang on, hear me out here. Never mind on the normative level. The rules say that the criteria is determined by the list you submit 28 days before. The list was submitted. The commission said, you qualify. They were asked again and again and again, do they still qualify? Yes. The day before, based on some offhand comments in a news story that they did not even bother getting clarity on, they went, oh, never mind, you don't qualify now, even though that violates their own rules. They broke their own rules. They should get sued, and they should have to pay damages to the Green Party, right?
Look, I think that the Green Party shouldn't have qualified in the first place, but once you tell them that they qualify, then you... Okay. I'm with you. I'm with you as far as that was concerned. Although I did find that the debate was better off for not having any vanity
totally
projects.
I'm not telling anyone that you should have to want the Greens in. All I'm telling you is that they violated their own rules. And then finally, when it came to media accreditation, right? Like, they gave up on their responsibility of determining who and who is not a qualified journalism organization. I'd blame the Debates Commission for tripping over their own dick, falling on their face, and then bloodying all of us because they cannot do their fucking jobs. This thing needs to be abolished, and the earth on which it stood needs to be salted for forever. I never want to hear about the fucking Debates Commission again. I want to go back to the days when CBC and CTV and the others got together, did a pretty good debate, ran it like a private enterprise, did a good job, and maybe we had some weird side debates on this on the fringes. Those were the good old days. This is intolerable. Although I will say, Steve Paikin, Patrice Waugh, good job. Both of you, good job.
So I think there's a better way of sort of trying to explain that a little bit, and that there was clearly friction during the debate between certain sort of alternative right-wing organizations and, for lack of a better term, the legacy media, which now is a bit of a nonsensical term, but we'll let it stand here. And that seems to be rooted in the idea that certain alternative right-wing organizations shouldn't have qualified for entry into the debate because they were also considered third-party advertisers by some people. And, personally, my position on this is I don't really care about any of that. I think that, the door should be opened as widely as humanly possible to anyone claiming to be journalism or otherwise. However, where I think that some of the legacy media had a very legitimate debate was that some of the right-wing organizations, when they were asking leader questions after the debates during scrums, did appear to be grandstanding. And I think that there was a very easy logistical fix for that by simply cutting people off after 30 seconds at the microphone and saying you only have 30 seconds to ask your question, then you got to move along. Yeah, and if they were unable... If they were unable to do that logistically, then that's a failure on the Debates Commission to handle the logistics of the debate.
Yeah, they tried to do that on the second night, and it ended up in such a catastrophe that they had to. That's what led to the cancellation. They cited security concerns.
So can you tell us what led to? Because after the second English debate, there was supposed to be a scrum, so media were supposed to be able to ask the leaders questions after the second debate, and that was canceled. Do we understand what the hell happened there?
So here's what I understand. Given the catastrophe that was the first night of Rebel and Juno dominating getting almost half of all the questions in the post-debate scrums, the commission basically promulgated these new rules that they made out of thin air that said every outlet only gets one question, which was supposed to be the original rules. And also we're going to do some traffic control to make sure no one's monopolizing them. And also we're going to cut off questions after like 20 seconds, which whatever, you should have done this to begin with. But when they did that, it clearly prompted some more tensions. And then on top of that, as I understand it, Ezra Levant, I think in his own words, tried to correct the CBC's reporting, I think, while they were still on air, and ended up getting into a very tense confrontation with Rosie Barton and David Cochran to the point where they didn't feel safe anymore. The commission, I think, then overreacted, called it a whole bunch of cops, and then started talking about security concerns that no one seems to be able to properly explain. The party apparatchiks I've talked to don't seem to know what they're on about. And then Michel Cormier shows up into the press room, abruptly says, due to our inability to organize this properly or whatever, we've canceled it. Good night and good luck. And then he fucks off out the back door as we're all yelling questions at him. This guy is paid for with our taxpayer dollars. This is notionally, this is an arm's length organization, but it is regulated by the government of Canada. This is completely unacceptable. This guy needs to be fired. The commission needs to be shut down. But as to what the actual security concern was, I have no idea. We have no clue, and we haven't gotten answers.
So this is a mess, and basically is continuing to reinforce the previous point that the debate commission sucks, and we should really abolish it and go back to what we had before.
100%. Yeah.
Got it. Moving.
And on that note, I have to go be on the bus.
You've got to go. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Justin Ling. Really appreciate your time. Have a lot of fun, and we'll chat soon.
Love it. Thanks, Jen.
Bye.
This message is brought to you by the Matei Nation of Ontario. It's Pettatanguishene, 1833. It has been 5 years since the Matei were forced to relocate from their home on Drummond Island. Matei families were cutting cedar logs by hand, and together they had petitioned for a church. They wanted ceremony and community. With their own hands, they raised St. Anne's, a cedar log church where baptisms, marriages, and kinship ties would bind the Matei community across the generations. But still, they had no priest, so they began to write, letter after letter, advocating for the Métis community, and eventually a priest arrived, beginning to formally record long-existing relationships within the Métis community and generations of Métis families' stories to come. 200 years later, St. Anne's Church remains one of the oldest in Ontario. It is now built of stone, but the Métis community in Pettatanguishene will never forget its humble origins, which rallied their community in the wake of their 1828 relocation. Historic Métis communities in Ontario are real, they are resilient, and they played an important part in building Canada. Learn more at OntarioMétisFacts.com.
We are back here again this week with Mike College, who is a president with Ipsos. Mike, we wanted to talk about a particular set of tracking surveys that you guys have been doing for a couple of years that generally looks into how Canadians are feeling. Mike College, Can you tell me, how are Canadians feeling? How are we feeling? How are we doing?
It depends whether you look at, I guess it doesn't depend. I was going to say it depends whether you look at the long term or the short term, but the answer is not very well.
Not good? We're not super cheerful?
Not super cheerful and not super upbeat.
There's a reason why the line is just taking off in popularity. It's
exactly.
a vibe.
If people were coming for happy news today, that's not going to happen.
Okay.
We're in a historically bad mood as Canadians, and across the board. I mean, there are some generations doing a little bit better, but they're all down. And what you see in the post we have in the line this week is that, our emotions are raw. We're more afraid, more frustrated, more concerned about the future. If you ask people about short-term sentiment, it's about as low as it's been, right? If you could put a number on that question of how are you doing today, it would be minus 19% in social research geek terms. And if you ask people, cast out 10 years and you tell me whether your quality of life or your financial prospects are going to be better or worse, it's net negative. So more people think that things get worse than get better in 10 years. And 10 years is a long-term out, right? If you think about stand in any room of people and say, how many people think their financial prospects are going to be worse in 10 years? And when a majority sort of lean into that, it's quite worrisome in terms of, how you get people to train to harness any sort of social capital is really a challenge.
So I think that we want to break that down a little bit, because when you ask people, like, do you think that things are going to get better 10 years from now? You're not actually asking them to predict what their actual situation will be 10 years from now. It's a reflection of their optimism in the moment, their optimism for the future in the moment. So it's not a predictive question. You're not actually asking them to predict. You're trying to ascertain how optimistic they are about the future.
Optimistic in the moment, and so and that optimism drives a lot of things, right? So if you're optimistic in the moment, you may save for the future because there's a future ahead. Right. You may enroll in a training program. You may suffer or be more willing to suffer through a downtime, like let's say tariffs, because you know that there's a payoff, or you feel today that there will be a payoff in the future. When you wring that optimism out of people, they're more likely to throw up their hands. And we talked about this last time, that quiet quitting around social cohesion, more likely to just say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, and they'll push back on governments, more likely to protest, more likely to be vocal about how they're feeling about things, as opposed to that.
Much more likely to burn things to the ground.
Exactly.
But also, I think the other interesting point is, especially if you're a new Canadian, far less likely to stick around.
Absolutely. And there are a couple studies that have shown that 5 to 7 years they're reevaluating things. And I think we'll see, I have kids who are 30 and 27, and we'll see down the road if they have opportunities, whether they stay.
Well, right? It's an interesting conversation. My kids are 5 and 8 myself, and I can't say what advice I would give them in 10 to 15 years. But if they were 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 years old right now, would I be telling them to stick in Canada?
Yeah.
Probably not. I'd probably be telling them, you know what, the next couple of years at a minimum are going to be pretty rough, and you should get out and see the world and go see if you can make your fortune in some place that's doing better than here, and best of luck, and come back when you're ready to settle down. You know, you hope, right? You hope.
Exactly. And then you hope that the good things turn around for them. And I think we see this reflected in the campaign, right? I mean, whether it's I'll use the words, whether it's immigration is broken or immigration isn't working. There are slightly variations on the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mirror, and I'm just picking immigration. It could be the economy, could be healthcare, could be a number of issues. That's just the leaders holding a mirror up to the population saying, I agree with you. Things
Yeah.
aren't going well, right? And that's
Yeah.
a good election strategy. But it may not be a good governing strategy, because to get people out of this, I'll say it's a funk, but it's more than that. You actually have to show them a path. You actually have to show them reasons to stay if they're newcomers, reasons or
Yeah.
your kids, right? You actually have to show them some prospects, some opportunities. You have to start to show them some wins in order for them to go, I'm a little more optimistic today than I was yesterday.
On the plus side, America is looking less and less appealing by the week. So we got that going for us.
Yeah, we got that going for us. But there are other countries in the world, Jen.
Oh.
And we are...
Darn it.
Exactly.
That makes things complicated now, doesn't it?
We are about to hit a demographic crunch all over the world. And Canada's big bonus has always been we can attract immigrants if we make the climate such that immigrants don't want to stay and young Canadians don't want to stay. You know, we used to worry about brain drain to the US. We may be prospects for brain drain to all of Europe.
Or even Asia now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen what the Chinese are doing with their TikTok account, but they are getting spicy, and it's kind of entertaining.
Yeah.
So the other interesting thing that I would start looking into is it looks like the predominant feeling that's coming out of your polling right now is frustration. That seems to be where Canadians are at.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a sense of, firstly, how has that shifted in recent years? And do you have a sense of what's driving that emotion?
Well, I think there's two levels of frustration. There's one, and we talked about this last time, about the differences between older, more established Canadians and younger Canadians. And so there's a difference there. But there's a frustration with, just quite frankly, financial prospects, right?
Right.
Can I make headway? Can I make gains? If you're younger, you're looking at older Canadians going, you made gains, so why can't I have the same thing? And then I think everybody has some frustration with institutions, right? When you have 6.5 million Canadians who can't find a doctor, that's a frustration. It's more than a frustration. It's life and death for some people, or health and non-health for some people. But it's a real frustration for everyone. And then you can go on through, there's some frustrations with education. A lot of our systems.
Oh, do we have frustrations with education?
Exactly.
Are we frustrated with education?
Yeah, like everybody is. So and it goes on and on. So it's not just one area. And we talk about a poly crisis, right? So one of the things that happened during the pandemic is people got focused on the pandemic, and it was urgent, and we were all focused on the one thing. And so it was reasonably easy time to govern. It was challenging, and we had a lot of things to do, but that was a true crisis. But when that passed, suddenly we had all of these issues. And we had a bit of that happening right now, right? We're very focused on the US-Canada relationship and Trump, but that's not going to last forever. And these institutions that are challenged, the economic challenges, a whole range of housing challenges, right? They're all going to come back, probably not worse, but there's something to feel worse because no progress has been made.
Right. And meanwhile, all of the pressure is continuing its backlog. One thing that you had alluded to previously, that there's a slight breakdown in sentiment along demographic lines. Could you give me two guesses to find out which Canadians are the happiest? If I were to just...
You want to play two questions or 20 questions instead of 20 questions?
I think I can get it in one.
It's a single word.
Get it in. My guess is that the least dissatisfied, least frustrated Canadians are boomers.
Yes.
Yeah, wow.
You know what the great thing about being a boomer used to be?
It's just the intuitive capacity I'm bringing to this conversation is top tier, I know. And also they'll be the first to tell you that they just don't understand why everybody else is so upset.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have a great question that we ask about how you get ahead in the world. And boomers, it's I think it's 4-1. You get ahead by merit and effort versus just luck. And by the time you get to Gen Z, it's like just luck, right? Like it's completely different views.
Be born around 1957. How about that? Get ahead.
That works for you. Yeah, the great thing about being a boomer is that I used to think it was that you could maintain this cultural relevance and you could listen to the Grateful Dead anytime you want. Now the great thing is you're the only generation who can afford to go see a concert. because the other generations are so
They're obviously
catastrophic.
just not, they're not working hard enough, Mike.
Yeah.
So look, I mean, I think that to be serious and not to trash talk the boomers too much.
No.
I'm going to presume that are you a boomer? Are you one of them?
Just on the edge.
Just on the
Boomer
okay,
light.
so therefore no one can accuse me of anti-boomer bigotry
No,
if I tease
exactly.
you
Yeah.
if I tease you a little bit. But one thing that's really interesting is that the boomers are kind of in this magical sweet spot where they'll be the first to tell you that they too suffered from really high housing prices and high interest rates way back in the 80s. And this was their hardship. And so therefore the rest of us ought not to complain. Please ignore the extraordinary housing gains they made in the subsequent 40 years. So they're really, really taking advantage of a housing crisis. Not their fault. I mean, and I don't blame, it's not a moral failing on their part. If I were able to take advantage of that kind of a housing gain, I would too. Of course I would. Like, so it's by all means, yes, but they are taking advantage of an extraordinary housing gain. They have registered unprecedented, I mean, in human history, unprecedented gains and opportunities for gains in their net worth as a result of the housing crisis and the value in assets in their housing, not to mention the stock market run, the extraordinary impacts of globalization have overwhelmingly accrued to them. The opportunities that they had in life are simply have not been replicated downstream. Okay. That I think is an indisputable point. That doesn't mean that they didn't get ahead also with hard work. You also needed to get ahead with hard work. I'm not saying that that's not true, but if you worked hard all your life in 1957, you're getting further ahead than if you worked hard all your life and you were born in 1997. These are very different life paths for you. And I think that equally hardworking people are not going to notice the same kinds of gains in those two respective age cohorts, right? Or at least we suspect as much. And I think that's now bearing out. So now that I've hopefully eased over some of those hurt feelings that I've done, now we have a group of people who are in this cohort where they've maximized the benefit of being Canada, but they have minimized their impact of being exposed to the institutional decline of Canada. So if you're a boomer right now, you're probably not quite in the healthcare system that's collapsing. Maybe you're beginning to be, but you're not quite there. You're free and shot of the education system that is a living nightmare. You're free and shot of the economic turmoil of the last 15 years, probably because you're retired or pretty close to, or you definitely have your nest. You probably have your nest egg in store, either in your housing or in your retirement. You probably have a defined benefit pension program, which is something nobody in any other age cohort has access to. So you're kind of getting the most wonderful aspects of Canada at its 90s peak, and you're still able to ride that energy, but you're not being exposed to the stuff that's falling apart, right? You're probably not taking public transit. You're probably not trying to do the entry-level job. You're not trying to get access to some of the things and supports that, for example, new Canadians are now trying to get access to. You're not staying in the hospital for 8 hours trying to get your kid an x-ray because his bone broke. You're not trying to navigate an increasingly poorly performing public healthcare or public education system. You're not trying to do all this stuff and then you run into the other kind of social cohesion problems that are compounding on all of that. So of course you're the happiest. Of course you're the least frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Relative to everyone else, right?
The only thing they might have is a 27-year-old living in their basement that they're worried about.
Sure, but that's their fault because their 27-year-old's not working hard enough. And can you even believe it?
Well, even if they are working hard enough, they're probably in a position that they can afford to have the 27-year-old living in their basement, right? So they're able to say, I'm being a good parent by holding on to the house and allowing them to live there. No, for sure. I mean, if you look at the red line for those two generations of what they're expecting, the red line for the boomers is really, let's not do anything too risky. Let's make sure whatever we do still protects what I've already got. Let's not touch pensions. Let's not touch the house prices or those kind of things. And let's ensure that things like healthcare doesn't get privatized. So I don't want status quo because I see some problems, but I'm very risk averse. If you look at the other side,
The other side's like, burn this shit
Go
down. The
for
system
it.
doesn't
Go
fucking
for
work
it,
for
right?
me.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna do my own investment because I don't have that much to lose and I can't afford others.
Yeah.
I'm willing to take a risk. I'm gonna do DIY. And the red line for them is it just can't be the status quo going forward.
Well, because
Right?
that's non-sustainable. The status
Yeah,
quo
so-
is collapsing around them. So
Yeah.
there's no future in the status quo.
Yeah. And so if you
Right.
want to shift into that, if you want to change to the start of where we talked about the data and this low optimism, this low public capital, you need that kind of capital to make the movement, right? You need to
Right.
convince people to step with you into what will be a couple years of no change comes easy, right? So,
Right.
that's not instantly. Let's say we separate more from the US and we build east-west trade and corridors for energy. That's going to take time and it's going to take a little bit of angst and suffering to get there. You need some social capital to burn to say, let's be all patient because it's going to get better in the long run, right?
Yeah.
You can see Mr. Trump trying to do it in the US, right? A little bit with the tariffs. His first he's like, no, this is going to hurt short term, but I'm going to buy a better America, sort of, right? Whether it's true or not, or it works out is another story. But you need that, right? In the absence of that, sort of need a majority government that's willing to burn its own political capital for years 1, 2, and 3, maybe, and say, you know what, people aren't going to like us because we're going to make the changes we think are right and try to reap and reform. We haven't had governments willing to do that for a long time.
No, not for a
right?
very long
No,
time.
And that's short-term retail politics. That's
I mean,
whole
even in this, even Burnham Down Pierre is not willing to touch retirement age. He's not willing to make minimal changes to the retirement age.
Yeah.
So that's the fundamental problem.
Well,
And
Mr.
I think
Trudeau was quick to move it back to 65.
Well, yes, exactly, and Pierre has said as well. And Pierre should be the party of being willing to burn things down and try things new. He's not willing to push it back up to 67.
Because it's hard to get elected by saying those things because there's so many boomers still alive.
There you go. And so basically you have an entire society that's run by highly satisfied people who've been able to take advantage of the opportunities that timing has afforded them, basically increasingly becoming, how shall I say this, I don't mean this in a bad way or in a loaded way, but increasingly becoming self-involved and self-interested at the expense of the younger generation who not only funds the systems that allow them to retire in comfort and peace, but also allows the country to maintain some degree of sustainability, economic and social cohesion and social sustainability.
And you add to that, sorry, go ahead.
So add to that by all means.
No, you add to that incredibly low economic and policy literacy in the country, right?
Right.
So it's hard to explain to people things that, and I don't know that it's worse than it was before, but it's worse because without that literacy, we don't trust leaders anymore. Right. We don't trust the institutions anymore. So it used to be, I'm not capable of understanding what the problem is with education or healthcare, but we've elected people who we're paying and we put in a position to work through, understand it, find a path, make things better. And if you're a boomer, you probably saw some of those things work. Because institutions
and so your understanding of all those institutions is that those institutions were functional and great. And again, why is everybody so upset now? I don't understand. Yeah. Well, don't you understand how well this worked for me?
And even if you're not happy with them now, you still think the institutions are worth working on. They just need to get going on things, right? So healthcare is fixable as long as we give, maybe it's the financial resources, the autonomy, the regulation for them to do their job, right? That's how boomers think. Where the other side thinks health isn't working because the system's not working.
This isn't just a matter of this issue's been starved or there's too little money in the system. It's that you could throw all the money in the world into the system. It's good money after bad at this point. It's the systemic collapse the rot is at the core.
So Doge in the U.S., right? Lots of pushback because it is crazy what they're doing in terms of slash and burn.
This is not how any reasonable person would go about creating an efficiency drive. Like this is dog and pony show.
The underlying theme of institutions need to be tightened, need to be adjusted. You can see where that holds amongst a big part of the population, right? Not how they're doing it, but what they say, and they're not going to reach their end goals. So it's, I don't want anybody to come and say the line says Doge is a good thing.
Here's the other question I have is that, we've seen in provinces, Alberta in particularly, they're moving more toward sort of a German style or a European style healthcare system in the sense that they're introducing more private delivery into a public care system. So they're outsourcing certain types of surgeries and procedures to consortiums of medical doctors. There's a whole set of issues around that we don't need to get into at present, but the idea is what it is. And I don't see there's whole lot of pushback to that in the way there would have been even 10 years ago. So one of my questions here is, as we see the older boomers entering into the healthcare system and being forced to interface with these institutions and being forced to confront that these institutions are not what they used to be, are we starting to see more of an opening to significant and systemic reform to these institutions so that they can get their needs met at a minimum?
For sure. I think boomers have always gotten what they wanted. And if they want care, they'll find a way to make it happen. That's one thing. The second is you never announce the revolution. If you have kids in school, right?
I do.
So go back to when you were in school.
Right.
Did you have to take pencils, pens, Kleenex boxes, papers, and a whole list of 200 things to school every year? Right?
Yeah.
No. What we've done is, for all intents and purposes, we pulled money out of the school and said we're going to make parents use or pay a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
We just did it quietly and over time. And we just upped the ante, right? So you have to participate in the fundraiser. If you don't, the kids aren't going to have X, Y, Z, right? That's become normalized. That was not normal when I was a kid, right?
Well, I said that's the user fee stuff doesn't. I think the user fee is incremental, and I think it's a problem, particularly for low-income families. But the bigger problem in the school system, if you talk to working parents, it's that the school systems are not built around working parents. The school systems still operate in the way that their mentality and their scheduling operates. They're still expecting mom to be at home to take care of the kids. That is the way all of these things are still working. Yeah. So we'll change the schedule on you last minute. We'll add another break because the study shows that if you keep on adding week-long breaks, it's great for the kids. We'll start this a little bit changing to you, but none of this takes into consideration that the kid's not operating as one element. A kid operates within a family unit, and that family unit has two working parents. And
family units are different because grandparents often aren't in the picture anymore.
And grandparents, we're talking about the neighbors. Grandparents aren't in the picture anymore. Grandparents are not providing. And I'd be fascinated by your data on this one, but grandparents are not providing anywhere close to the supports that they did even a generation ago. Yeah. So extended family networks have collapsed. Because of the housing crisis, you've got more and more people moving away from their extended family in order to look for cheaper housing and opportunity. That's led to sort of other types of social cohesion. So raising kids right now is a very, very different conversation. And a point that I've made in recent past is that more and more working families are relying on government institutions to fill the gap that used to be filled by extended families, grandparents, and tighter communities. So they're more and more reliant on daycare to do this. Let's not talk about the way that the daycare funding's not worked out, because I only have so much emotional bandwidth for this conversation. But there was a really great idea from the federal government going into, hey, we're going to create affordable daycare in order to fill these gaps. Execution's been a bit on the lacking side.
Well,
which fundamentally continues to undermine your faith in the capacity of these institutions to fix problems, right? Yeah. And again, it just erodes away and chips away at the issue.
There's the delivery side of government, but I also think government stopped to a certain extent communicating the good things it does. Right. So there are good things that happen in government. If you work in government, you just see.
You see good things.
You see good things happen. There's a net worth to government. And I think that
I'm not on team, let's go back to full libertarian living on the land. I'm all for civilization. It's great.
But they've stopped, I think, communicating some of the positive things. The communications tend to be around policies they want to move forward. They're not all political, but they're somewhat political. And I think we've lost some of the value of government. How do you reinforce it? How do you build it? I don't know how many people would say, I think it's a great idea for my kids to go into government today. Those kind of things. And there's some work to do on that.
Yeah, I guess, but it's also not just a communications thing, but before you start announcing a new national program for like $3 per kid lunches, communicate to me how you're being effective at the job we just elected you to do. Like, yes. I think the too many of the habit of particularly liberal governments and to a lesser extent conservative governments is, I'm going to prove my effectiveness and worth to you by launching a whole new thing you didn't ask for. No, I just want you to deliver the thing you already promised well. I would just like that to be like 10% better. If you could make the healthcare system 10% better, I'm a happy camper. You know, if you can make the schools just 10% better, we're good. You know, I don't need you to launch a new program, a shiny new legacy program. I just need you to make everything 10% better than it is today.
Which is in part why we've seen trust in business go up as opposed to trust in government, right? Because business realized we have to, because there's a market.
There's a market to make up for government failure.
We even go somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So if I don't deliver on time, if I don't deliver quality, and I don't do the things that if I don't fulfill my brand promise, then the trust breaks down. And when if you go back to the pandemic, Canadians were a lot more likely to say, I trust what I'm hearing from business than what I hear from government. Because they were the front line, they were delivering, they were doing things, they were realistic, they were quick, they were agile, they moved fast, right? Not the government, it moved fast, but it didn't move the same.
Well, they're different responsibilities, though. It's like we saw businesses respond more effectively within the realm of the responsibilities that were allocated to them, sort of thing.
So they do a good job of their job, business, typically, or they wouldn't survive. And so we start to
I'm not asking private businesses to deliver my justice system. Like, I'm not here for that. You know,
but on some of the fringe parts, I don't, you know, the smaller parts of, it's not smaller, on some parts of government delivery, you can see where people go, why don't we get business to do that? Right? Because it's efficient over here, right? Now, we get into a whole bunch of motives and profit motives from those things, but you can see why.
Or we start to see the fundamental challenges of allocating government resources to private businesses and how that can go badly wrong in certain provinces more than others.
Yes, exactly.
Not to name names.
I mean, I think the biggest thing though that we're seeing is just this lack of optimism, where, you know, you used to be able to hold out hope that, you know, there was a reason to weigh in and help build this thing, Canada. And we're starting to see fewer and fewer people who necessarily feel that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. We rambled on a little bit and ranted about the boomers more than I usually like to allow myself to do. But you know what? I'm hoping that people will take it in a good light and a good spirit, and hopefully do something productive with it. So again, this is Mike College. He's from Ipsos. He's the president at Ipsos, and he is with us throughout this election on a weekly basis to sort of take a look at what some interesting underlying tracking down data is showing him about all kinds of issues, from social cohesion to just overall sentiment. So thank you very much for your time, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jen.